Hey everyone, this is Lomi, and today I'm finally getting a chance to work on the doll family Bobo fish I unboxed a while back. I knew early on what colors I wanted to use. I knew I wanted him to be a classic black, white, and orange koi, but I wasn't sure at first how I wanted to do that. Eventually, I found my inspiration in watercolor paintings. I don't have watercolors, so hopefully I'll be able to reach the same effect with gouache paint. At first I accidentally thinned my gouache with water from the plain water jar instead of the Flow-Aid jar, so it wouldn't go on very well. Once I added some Flow-Aid, you can see the huge difference that made. Watercolor anything is a huge challenge for me because I'm so tightly structured with everything I do. I like precision and order, and trying to get a watercolor look on anything is a nightmare for me because it's so messy. I try to help the color flow and bleed by keeping it really thin and using lots of paint. This is really likely to run or drip, and I've had to promise myself that that's okay. I'll build up a layered look the same way you would with watercolor, going over it a few times. For the fins, I really want it to look like the color has run, so getting organic shapes gives me an interesting challenge. I also made myself promise I wouldn't go back and wipe stuff if I messed up, so mistakes will stay put. If I want a natural, splashy watercolor look, I need to be okay with the paint being uncooperative in some places, and the place that really challenges me is that big patch where the black and orange paint are touching. The colors keep bleeding together there, and while I think I can make it look a little cleaner after a few layers, it's hard to let go and accept the natural bleeding that happened over there. I tried to circumvent it by making sure the layers were more dry, but it was just determined to bleed. The tail is the one place I wish I were using watercolors instead of gouache because I think watercolors would be much more transparent, but I'm not going to dwell on it. The whole letting go thing is so hard for me, but it's an important part of practice, and it's also kind of nice to work on something and not be so perfectionist about it. I hope that someday I reach a point where I'm skilled enough that I can look at my work and be really happy at the end, instead of looking at it constantly with a critical eye. But there's this phase in the middle of every creative journey where you've just sort of lost confidence in what you can do. Because you know there's so much more out there that you don't know. You're learning and advancing, gaining competency, but that vast amount of knowledge that isn't yours yet just constantly looms over your head. It's hard to silence that voice that's like, this isn't good enough, this isn't the best you could do. If you just redid this or did this differently, your work could be so much better. In some ways, it's more fun to be just starting out and seeing what you can do for the first time. Because then everything you do is this great, beautiful accomplishment, and it's so easy to be proud of what you've done, even if it's not perfect. In some ways, I feel like we should all try to be a little bit more like that in everything we do. It's good to let go of that drive for perfection and that constant desire to advance and get better, and instead celebrate that whatever you're doing it to the best of your ability right now. And that's kind of a beautiful thing. I left my phone in frame. Hi, Yuna. Once the patches are done, I add some speckles around them to make things a bit less polished and a little more interesting. The speckles were probably the most fun of the whole process. I'm glad I went with the koi colors. I really like seeing them on this little fish. And doing things watercolor means I'm not doing as much to the doll to hide the sculpting. Those little scales are so cute, and sometimes when you put on really heavy blushing, I feel like you lose sight of some of the sculpting work. My family has koi in their pond, and my mom named most of them after Pokemon. The big ones are like Goldeen, Sea King, and Magikarp. I think there are some others, but I forget what they are. I just think it's really funny that my mom named her fish after Pokemon of her own free will. Once I'm satisfied with the paint, I move on to the blushing, which will be a quick step. I add just a bit of pink to the cheeks and the lips, just so his face is a little more dimensional. Then I put on a ton of pearl powder on top of that. I also add pearl powder to the fins, both the top and bottom of the fins, and I put it on heavy. I'm only going to do one layer of pearl powder because I'm almost out of sealant, and I need to do a few top coats to finish this off. My favorite supply store is getting ready to move to a new building, so I haven't been able to get any more. After that layer of sealant dries, I've got one last thing I want to try on this little guy. I bought this iridescent medium recently because I thought it would be really interesting to try for dolls. I thin this down a bit and add it to the edges of his fins. Unfortunately, it looks like it's not so much iridescent as it is just a really pearlized, semi-transparent, kind of milky white paint with a lot of glitter in it. It's not quite what I was hoping for, but it was worth a try, and I don't think it looks bad. While the fish himself is drying, I work on some stuff for his habitat. I cut some lengths of wire and twist them together to make up for how thin they are. Then I cut a few pieces of ribbon that are a shade longer than the wires. I fold the ribbon in half and glue the center to make a little bit of a point. Then I glue a wire in between the two halves of the ribbon. I'm using a low-temp hot glue gun, but it would still be really easy to burn myself. So if you decide to do something like this at some point, please be really careful or have an adult help you. And by that, I mean I still totally make my mom help me with projects when she comes to visit. I'm an adult, but she's an adultier adult, so she's really more responsible. Once it's glued all the way down, I twist and scrunch up the ribbon and then glue the end to a glass bead. Now it's seaweed. I stick the seaweed into the bottom of a rose bowl instead of a fish bowl, because this has a much larger opening on the top. It'll be easier to get the fish in and out. I pile more glass gems on top of the seaweed to help it stand. Since it's glued to the gems, they'll help hold it down in the bottom of the bowl. And just pick out a dog hair here. And now the fish can go into his home. Isn't he cute? I think his name's going to be Cornelius. Even though I really like how the watercolory patches turned out, I'm not totally happy with the side of his face that I left blank, because it doesn't look intentional so much as that I forgot to do something there. So I may go back with my watercolor pencils and add an eyelid crease. It's a weird addition for a fish because they don't have eyelids, but I think it'll go a long way to making the white eye look more like it was planned. And that's all for today though. Thanks for watching. Bye.